just want to point out two of the things that came across in some of those sikhs regarding Bidan Notzach, which I think will give us a little bit of perspective of what the story was all about, at least in the way I understand it. And most importantly, in the Hirah, to what it means to us practically today. So, two of the general inyanim that were being discussed in this particular case is one of them, as I mentioned before, that the Rebbe kept on saying that people are insisting in speaking about a matter of a Yerusha, people are insisting in speaking about a matter of whether there can be an inheritance, but when we speak about the Rebbe was of course simply speaking about the Friedrich Rebbe, the Rebbe was speaking about the Nitzchius of the Rebbe, of the concept of Mas Zarei B'chaim Afu B'chaim, and that while some people are saying that Yud Shvat had happened 35 years earlier, and that the Friedrich Rebbe was nostalgic 35 years earlier, and as the Rebbe said, one of the times the Rebbe said the expression that this person claims he himself was by the Levaya, he himself was by the funeral. The Rebbe says, however, the truth of the matter is that the Rebbe is alive here and now, and more than ever before, and every single day becoming more and more alive, mehr lebendiger, mehr frischer, more fresh, more alive, more active, and so on. The Rebbe actually even went as far as to say, the Rebbe was saying, go try to speak to a person that in his mind the only thing that's real, the only thing that counts is how much money you have in the bank. That's the only thing that's real by it. We don't have sort of a common language. When we're speaking about a language that a Rebbe is nitzchi, that the Rebbe is alive forever and ever, and so on, and here is a person that the only thing he speaks to him is, the Kashmi is the money in the bank. And the Rebbe even went as far as to say that by doing these sorts of actions, Chas v'sholem and Rachmana litzlan, you are causing another levaya here and now by even entertaining these sorts of ideas and acting upon them and so on. So this was one nakuda that the Rebbe kept on emphasizing again and again, that there's no concept of Yerusha because the Rebbe is still alive. And the other thing that also came across very strongly is, as we know, we're speaking about whether there is a concept, b'chalal, of a Rebbe having private belongings, of a Rebbe having private sforim, whether that's even possible, whether that's even a case. And we all know that the Rebbe, in a sikha, quoted the words of the Rebbetzin, very famously having said, when she was asked about who the sforim belonged to, whether it belonged to her father or it belonged to the Hasidim, and she answered those very, very famous words that my father and his seforim belong to Hasidim. In other words, that there's B'chalal, he doesn't have anything private to himself. He doesn't have a private life, so to speak. He himself belongs to the Hasidim. There's a very famous mimer of the Rebbe. We'll get back to this point in a second. There's a very famous mimer of the Rebbe, which is actually always learned Gimel Tammuz time. I mean, it's around that time of the year. Parshas Chukas. And it's interesting at that time because it comes out just after Gimel Tammuz usually. A very famous mimer, those who want to look it up, from Mugen Tavshin and Aleph, we'll look at Hay, or Maimon Tavshin Chavtes. But in that mimer, very briefly, I don't want to get too deep into the Haskalah of the mimer right now, but in that mimer, the Rebbe asks the following question, very briefly. On Zois Chukas HaTorah, the Medrash Rashi brings that it speaks about the Paro Aduma, that it's always going to be called by the name of Moshe Rabbeinu. This is always going to be called the Parashas of Moshe, etc. This is the Chukah is associated with Moshe Rabbeinu, more than even other mitzvahs. And this Maimer, the Rebbe explains, based on Medrashim and Mamorim and so on, that the concept of Parah Aduma, we usually know, is a Chukah, is something that's beyond our understanding. And we have to do it just because the Eibishter commanded us to do it, and we have to do the same thing also with all other mitzvahs. We always have to do mitzvahs just because that's what the Eibishter said, regardless of our own understanding. And the Rebbe brings from the Medrash that even though most people don't understand, and even Shlomo HaMelech couldn't understand the reason for Parah Aduma, but to Moshe Rabbeinu, the Eibishter did reveal the reason for Parah Aduma. And the Rebbe asks the following question. If from Moshe Rabbeinu himself, Parah Aduma is not a chukah, so to speak, because he understands it, why is this chukah going to always be called on the name of Moshe Rabbeinu? And he's the one that gives us the koiches to fulfill mitzvahs just with bitul, and as a chukah, and higher than tam vadas. If from Moshe Rabbeinu himself, this very mitzvah wasn't even a chukah, he was able to understand it. That's the Rebbe's question. And eventually in the Maimer, before answering this question, the Rebbe asks a question regarding the geulos of the Alter Rebbe and the Frierdiker Rebbe and the other Rebbe. A very fascinating question the Rebbe asks. We know that the Rebbe Rashab famously said about Yutes Kislev that Ma Zayis Hazekish a Koitchenoi Soy Moitzi Shamnoi. That just like an olive, when you press it, it gives out the oil. So too, after Yutes Kislev, after the arrest and liberation of the Alter Rebbe, we know a whole new stage in Afotzas HaMayonis. So the Rebbe asked a very interesting question. The Rebbe says, we know that by the Rabbeim, everything that happens by the Rabbeim is with their consent. Mirtzoino and Bahaskomoso. Nothing could happen to a Rebbe if he himself did not agree to it. And the Rebbe brings the famous stories how the Alter Rebbe, when he didn't want the horse and wagon to travel or the boat to go, it stopped, and so on. So the Rebbe asks a simple question. If, in truth, for the Alter Rebbe itself, it wasn't, so to speak, such a Helem Vehester, it wasn't really such a big concealment, because really he was sort of in charge of the situation anyways the whole time. So if you don't have the real Yerida, so to speak, then how is there an Aliyah afterwards? Yerida Tzoyrech Aliyah. You squeeze the olive, you get the oil. But if it wasn't a real Yerida, so to speak, then how do you get to the Aliyah? If it wasn't a real squeeze, he put himself in the situation, you could almost say, then how do you get to the advantage afterwards? And this is what the Rebbe answers. The Rebbe answers because a Rebbe, that a Roye Yisrael, his whole inyan, the whole inyan of a Rebbe and of a Moshe Rabbeinu, regardless of all of his high darkness, and his Torah and his Avodah, and all of his amazing Madregas and Avodas Hashem, his number one thing of a Rebbe, of a Roya Yisrael, and its very, very essence, is the fact that he is the Roya Yisrael. His number one thing is that he is one with Yidden. Moshe hu Yisrael, Yisrael hu Moshe, Hanosi hu HaKoil, and all the other expressions. And therefore, says the Rebbe, listen to this, fascinating thing, only the Rebbe could say. For the Alter Rebbe, it was a Yerida. It was a Hazayis Hazekeshem Koichenoisai. It was a descent. It was a darkness. You know why? Because for the Chassidim it was a darkness. Because for the Chassidim it was a Yerida. The Chassidim were in trouble here. Wow, the Rebbe's in jail. And if for the Chassidim it's a time of tsar, then for the Rebbe it's a time of tsar. Because the Chassidim are in pain. Seems like a little bit of an interesting loophole here. The Rebbe is putting himself in a situation, but the Chassidim are in tsar, and therefore the Rebbe is in tsar, and therefore the Rebbe could gain, so to speak, the aliyah that comes afterwards. Just quickly to tie it back, Zois Chukas HaTorah, the Rebbe says the same thing with Zois Chukas HaTorah. Why is it called a Chukah for Moshe? Moshe understands the reason. But he is one with Yidden. If the Yidden don't get it, if it's a Chayk for the Yidden, then it's a Chayk for Moshe Rabbeinu as well. Getting back to the story of Hey Tavis and Yud Beis Tammuz. The Rebbetzin said those famous words, that the Rebbe and Chassidim are one. Now, of course, before Hey Tavis, in other words, from the time that this court case started, from the time that this Kitrug started, and by the way, the Rebbe said very, very clearly, I made comparisons to you this week, saying clearly that it was a Kitrug up above. It wasn't a someone decided to start up over there. There was a Kitrug going on. There's a spiritual thing going on. So, l'cha'oira, again, this is the way I understand it. If one of the main victories was that the Rebbe and Chassidim are one, and whatever belongs to the Rebbe belongs to Chassidim. Chassidim belong to the Rebbe belongs to Chassidim. The Rebbe's Sfarim belong to Chassidim, it's all one. And this was one of the main issues that was being contested over here, whether a Rebbe has a private life, or are we one with the Rebbe? Hey Tavis is telling us, the victory of Hey Tavis is telling us, we are one with the Rebbe. The Rebbe is one with us. And if part of that issue was, well, who says there is even a Rebbe anymore? Because that's what the Rebbe was saying the other side was claiming. 35 years ago, there was a huge shvat, it's all over. So if part of again, what was being contested was, is there a Rebbe even more? And the Rebbe kept on saying, Hu b'chayim, he's alive. And he's more alive than ever before. So when Hey Tavis and Idan Notzach comes, and the Idan Notzach is saying clearly, La'einei Amim, as the Rebbe put it, that the Rebbe is alive, and therefore there is no Yerusha. So to put that both of those things in one sentence, those two things that we're speaking about is that we are one with the Rebbe is one with us, and that this bond never stopped to exist. This bond never can stop to exist, because the Rebbe continues to live, the Rebbe continues to be with us every single minute, every single day. So if we want to know on Hey Tavis, 30 years after the original Hey Tavis, Tavshin Mem Zayin, in Tavshin Ayin Zayin, what does Hey Tavis mean to us? Why are we celebrating? Why are we excited? Why should we be jumping and dancing? Why is the Rebbe saying this is a Yom Tov? Especially after Gimel Tammuz. This is the message. The message is that the Rebbe is telling us, I am with you, you are with me, we're all one, we cannot be separated, I am alive, I am with you all the time, and that's the pshat, in simple words of what it means, Idan Notzach. In simple words, what the Rebbe is telling us is that this bond, this connection is an everlasting one, we're staying together, no one could ever undo this. And as the Rebbe put it, this was put in the base Mishpat Federali, this was in the federal courts and in the courts, even the Goyim are acknowledging this. This is what Idan Notzach means to us. So l'chaim, on a practical level, of course, we have to do the Hiroz that the Rebbe said, to go and buy this Sfarim and learn this Sfarim and all of these in Yanu, but also in our everyday living. What it means to us is to continue living and to continue celebrating the Idan Notzach, that yes, we have the Rebbe, yes, the Rebbe is with us, yes, the Rebbe continues to be with us, and we should be able to celebrate another 7 days now, like we celebrated those first 7 days. And with a simcha bli gvul, ad bli dar, that the Idan Notzach with the Izgalus of the Rebbe take it from Yad Mamash.
Okay, let's go.
I'll get a charger. Don't worry about the charger.
Okay, so just do it. Okay, we'll try it. Why is it? Yeah, shortcut to live. No.
Sign with Google.
No, I'll do it. I'll put it onto our account. I'll call her in a second. Okay, I'm going to call her in a second. One of your phone's ringing. Yeah. It's just not ringing. This is going live on the internet. And now I've lost it. What happened?